folks.
Good evening. Long time no see.
We survived.
We will survive. Hope y'all are doing all right.
Trying to get everything set up, and here's the Lulu to say hello to everybody.
Yep, there's.
Hello, Lulu.
Need to silence this. There it goes. All right.
It's been a while since we've done this, can you tell? We forgot to do certain things like, silence the noises.
But
your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, Lulu.
Blog Talk Radio.
so now we got
Blog Talk.
Blog Talk,
got
Facebook Live, and
Kitty Cat.
Kitty Cat.
Because Lulu wants attention tonight.
You gonna join the show tonight? You haven't been on the show in a while. Contemplating. We're
She's
thinking
like,
about
get
it.
the fire going. I'll be on the show.
Yeah.
It's getting chilly out there, folks.
Not chilly enough tonight to need a fire in the fireplace, but maybe next time in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we haven't been here in 3 weeks.
Yes.
Now, it's been 3 weeks because October, and it was a busy October, which is good. It was nice to kind of have a little taste of normalcy after the last time.
Busy month.
Yeah, the time that we shall not speak of.
Yes.
That
time.
But, yep, we are here. We're still sitting. And, yeah, we're ready to go ahead and dive back into it with some fun haunted history stories again.
Yes. So we're talking about underground catacombs, vaults, tunnels, all that fun jazz tonight.
Yeah.
Because underground.
Because why not?
Yes. Spooky things.
Spooky things underground. But, yeah, so it's been, let's see, gosh, quick shout out to our friends, because we've been busy for the last couple weeks. We went out and hung out with Transcend Paranormal on Saturday night.
Yep, and it's an investigation over at Beaver Dam Depot and North Anna Battlefield and over at the Tavern. So very fun out there. We still need to listen to our evidence. We've been bad.
Yeah.
We will do that this weekend when we have 4 days off.
Yes.
But definitely want to get back out to the battlefield and walk that during the day.
Pretty neat place. One of the ones that we have not visited at all before going out there in the pitch dark for an investigation. So
yeah,
we'll go out there during the day sometime.
And check it out.
Yep. But yeah, just a little over a week past Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Oh yeah, let's see, since the last time we did the ghost walks at night with Hanover Tavern, so we were up there for that a couple of weeks ago, had a good time with that.
Yep. Chris had fun doing that all 3 nights. I went up for one night. Lots and lots of tours, and we've got, of course, our new tour coming up this month, the John Marshall and Court End Ghost Tour.
Yep, so partnering with the John Marshall House for a 30-minute indoor tour of the John Marshall House and its haunted history, followed up with a 45 to 60-minute outdoor tour with us, touring the rest of Court End and checking out the rest of the neighborhood.
Yep.
So, looking forward to that. That first opportunity for that is a week from this coming Saturday. It'll be November 20th.
And if anybody wants to come on my tour, I'm giving the first one, 7 o'clock.
Yep. So, only a few spots left for that. That one's kind of filling up.
Yep.
So
because we are limited on the space with John Marshall's restrictions right now.
Yep.
So, but definitely come and check that out. Jeffrey will be giving the second tour.
Yep. So be a lot of fun to be had there.
Yep.
So anyways, yeah, now that we're a little caught up with how things have been for the last few weeks, we can dive into the subject matter at hand.
Yes, you want to start with?
Ooh, do I get to read
You get to do...
I get to read the introduction I wrote?
Yes, you do.
Yay. So, alright.
I have my drink before you.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, humankind has long sought to dig down into the depths of the world to create vaults, caves, tunnels, and caverns beneath the ground that we walk on. These subterranean networks tend to lie forgotten under our feet as life above ground churns along at its hectic pace. Many do not realize that just under the surface of the world we know are complex realms which have remained hidden in the dark from the eyes of mankind. These underground places can sometimes hold mysteries just as bizarre and fascinating as any of the mysteries to be found above ground, making the deep, dark recesses of our planet and its claustrophobic atmosphere a place where mysteries gather and lurk out of sight. Creepy stories about catacombs and other subterranean chambers abound, often because it's easy to imagine the short step from exploring the underground to one's final resting place. This equivalence gives rise to horrifying and sometimes spirited tales that strike not only fear but also intense curiosity into the minds of mankind. Thrill seekers often enter the dark recesses of catacombs and hidden chambers from around the world, but not all of them come back out. This all only serves to amplify the mysteries, fears, and fascinations that surround the unknown worlds that lie under our feet. Little disclaimer about tonight's episode.
Yep.
Tonight's tales are not all paranormal in nature. Some of the facts about the real-life events that surround these underground places can be just as chilling, if not more so, than any spirited encounter.
Yep, so our first one is actually a legend. There's possible truth to it, but it has become a legend in its own right.
Yeah. So, and before we dive into that, hello Patrick, hi Donnie, and
hi Mom.
But yeah, got the gangs all here tonight.
Yep.
So
we're gonna have fun with this one. This one was an interesting one to dive into research-wise, because there's a lot of catacombs out there, there's a lot of vaults out there, and there's a lot of caves out there. And we've covered a couple of these already. We've already talked about the Edinburgh catacombs. We've talked about the Mammoth Cave.
We'll be touching on the
Yeah.
Edinburgh again tonight.
Edinburgh's incredibly haunted.
Yeah.
So I found more stories.
And there will be a couple of very well-known ones. As, Edinburgh. We will be getting to Paris, of course.
Because I couldn't do this without talking Paris.
You have to. If you're going to talk catacombs, you have to talk Paris. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. We got a couple stops to make before we get there.
Yeah. So we're going to jump over to Ukraine. I found one in Ukraine that was a legend, and I thought it was pretty cool.
You want me to go?
You can do this.
I'll kick things off then. So the first stop takes us halfway around the world to the far edges of Eastern Europe on the shores of the Black Sea. Here you will find the city of Odessa, Ukraine. Now, Odessa is home to the largest set of catacombs in the world, something which I did not know. Everything else pales in comparison to the span of the Odessa catacombs. They span over 1,500 miles of dark tunnels that only the most experienced of subterranean explorers should venture into on their own. Getting lost in these catacombs is almost certainly a death sentence, as exemplified by the tragic tale of Masha, an innocent partygoer who ventured down into the depths with some friends, took a wrong turn or two, and got lost forever. Now, the legend of Masha might only be that, a legend to serve as a warning to those who might feel bold enough to recklessly explore the dark recesses on their own. But the story is believable enough for many to share the tale first and worry about the facts behind it later. According to a catacombs explorer named Eugene Lada, who brought Masha's story to the English-speaking world, the tale begins late on New Year's Eve in 2005. It was a foggy night with temperatures hovering around freezing. Masha went out with a large group of friends to celebrate and, well, probably get drunk. It's not certain if they were former students of Odessa School number 56, but according to Russian news sources, that's where they found the entrance to the underground. Clearly, this was a bad idea. The only Ukrainians to have any official business down there are workers in active mines who still dig for limestone today. However, that hasn't stopped many people from making the same trip Masha apparently made. There are stories of industrious winemakers and mushroom growers who go down there regularly to leave their product to age or grow, confident that no one will find it and interfere. We don't know for sure what Masha was looking for when she went into the catacombs with her friends. They could have been looking for treasures that night, considering that there are rumors that somewhere below School 56 there's a solid gold replica of the Titanic that's said to be a few inches long. Don't know where that rumor came from, but interesting.
But, I mean, gold you're going to go digging for, right?
So, or maybe they were searching for something much more macabre. There is a rumor that the catacombs contain the remains of murdered Jews from World War II, and there's also evidence that they were used for the summary executions of Nazi soldiers. Regardless of what they were searching for that night, the catacombs are not easy to navigate, especially when you're drunk like Masha likely was that night. They're not the safest places to be either. Some sections regularly flood with groundwater, and others have ceilings precariously propped up with ad hoc support beams, or they've had their ventilation systems completely dismantled. They're also a pretty good place to stage a murder. In 2015, a guy in his 20s was sentenced for reportedly murdering his teenage girlfriend in the catacombs with an axe. In 2011, a male murder victim was found by chance in the catacombs after he had been dead for 3 to 6 months. But being murdered and having your body dumped in the catacombs might be considered a luxury holiday compared to what is rumored to have happened to Masha. The teens are said to have stayed down there all night. In the morning, they braved the morning cold to get back to hearth and home, but in their foggy states, they absent-mindedly, or maliciously, left Masha in the catacombs. If Masha had wandered off, even just for a minute or two, it's easy to imagine that she could have moved beyond screaming distance. Perhaps her path forked a few times and she lost track of the pattern. In her likely inebriated state, each step she took would have been a step towards a gruesome and horrifying fate. If the area near School 56 had no groundwater or clandestine wine or mushrooms, there would have been nothing for her to eat or drink. There also would have been nowhere to stay warm, since that area is not so deep enough for it to have been much warmer than the chilly surface weather that night. It would have been utterly black, but even with a light and a map of the catacombs, it would have been hard for someone ill-prepared to make it out, because the maps that exist are a maddening brain-like scrawl. Assuming Masha brought a battery-powered flashlight or lantern down into the depths, it would have died after a few hours, making it harder to continue the search for warmth and water. If she was lucky, she died quickly from the cold. If it was too warm to freeze and she was exerting herself trying to survive, dehydration would have become severe enough in perhaps 2 to 3 days before the symptoms became debilitating. She would have gotten delirious, convulsed, and slipped irreversibly into a coma around the 3rd day. Not that she would have noticed the days passing. She couldn't have lasted down there more than a week. During the time that she was lost inside, her friends didn't try to find her, likely out of fear of the punishment that they would receive for exploring where they hadn't belonged in the first place. About 4 months after New Year's in April of 2005, word spread amongst cave explorers that there was a fresh body down there. Photos were taken, the most famous of which shows 3 blank-faced boys who look like they're in their early teens, posing like they've just stumbled upon the body in a narrow, curved section of the cavern. In the photo, Masha is unidentifiable beyond simply being a human. She lies on her left side, legs curled like she's sleeping, while the upper half of her decomposing body has lost its form altogether and has begun to turn indistinguishable from the cavern's yellow limestone floor. Lada claims that 2 years passed and no one retrieved the body. He recalls that a piece of writing by a friend he says is a quote-unquote famous journalist was delivered to government officials. It's not clear what the journalist wrote, but Lada claims the government got moving and removed the body less than 24 hours later. Kasha Pugovin, who identified himself as a veteran of Ukraine's anti-terrorist operation based in Odessa, claims to be the one who personally hefted the body in that photograph out of the depths. His recollection of the events is a little different from Lada's. According to Pugovin, someone else had vanished in 2004, Janis Stendix. Sorry. The son of a newspaper magnate. Pugovin recalled that Janis's father was offering a reward to anyone who could find his son, and some people he called diggers, or manual laborers, had tipped off the authorities about a body 2 or 3 miles from an entrance to the catacombs. With his heart set on a possible reward, Pugovin says he crawled into the depths and eventually stumbled upon what he called bone soup. He wrapped the remains in a blanket and dragged it out of the recesses of the catacombs. He then dragged the body to the police medical examiner's office about 5 miles from the entrance Masha was rumored to have used. Unfortunately for Janis's father, a DNA test proved that the remains were not those of his missing son. To Pugovin's distress, the remains were of no value. The story of Masha stands as the most likely explanation behind the remains that were photographed in the catacombs. Perhaps in an attempt to dissuade further exploration and exploitation, the organization behind the Odessa Catacombs website states that the story of Masha and the body that was found is all a lie, an elaborate hoax. Lada, for his part, stands by his story and doesn't blame the Odessa Catacombs for wanting to stay out of the fray. Lada even claims that he is close friends with the person responsible for the website that calls Lada a liar. Lada understands their desire to steer clear of this grim piece of business. The photo of the body, it seems, will never be positively identified, and it immortalizes the last moment of someone's life. Whether that person is an innocent partygoer or a Ukrainian drunk who took a few steps too many into the darkness, it sends imagination soaring because it conjures the exact kind of nightmarish, lonely death that everyone fears the most.
Part of me wants to see these caverns, part of me wants nothing to do with them.
As I said, kind of a grim tale, and not even a ghost to be found.
Yeah.
Sometimes truth
is just as scary
as the ghostly tales that can accompany it. But this next stop, we do have some ghostly tales to go with. And this is a place that's a little closer to home.
And near and dear to our hearts, because we love visiting here.
Yes.
So we'll have to see if we can maybe hop on one of these tours. Alright, so we're going to hop down to Savannah, Georgia. Of course, it's in the same time zone, thank goodness. And we can get there in a half-a-day drive. It's full of narrow streets that are shaded by the long reaches of tree branches, making for somewhat brighter comparison to the tunnels that lie below Savannah's streetscape. The tunnels play host to darker chapters of Savannah's past, which in turn presented us with some of what we have to share with you here. Now there was a lot of stories about this, and I had to separate the wheat from the chaff in this one. So we'll start with the Pirate's House, because that's the one everybody knows. There's a tunnel running out of the Pirate's House. It's a 250-year-old property that remains one of the most visited buildings in Savannah's historic district. Aside from its ties to the pirate lore, there's another reason why the Pirate's House continues to lure locals and visitors alike. And that's because of the tunnel that allegedly runs from its basement to River Street. Or, some people say. Realistically, it was probably intended to be the bar's sewer, but that's a theory that isn't as enticing as the legend. As the story goes, once the preferred drinking spot for sailors and the rough and tumble folks of the 19th century, the Pirate's House was the perfect locale to catch people unaware. Drunk seamen and criminals would drink at the bar, demanding another and another until they passed out. When they woke up, they found themselves on a ship in the middle of the sea. Some claimed the kidnappers were pirates, while others labeled them as sea captains, unwilling to waste time in recruitment. Nevertheless, the unsavory patrons were dragged down the rum cellar into the basement of the Pirate's House before being brought through the secret tunnel and out onto River Street and put onto a ship. Today, the Pirate's House is said to be one of the most haunted locations in the city. Thanks to the murders, the fights, and a lot of stolen criminals that once drank here. Current patrons of the bar have witnessed seeing apparitions meandering through the upper floors, and as well as hearing phantom footsteps prowling around. And down in the basement, well, it's said you can hear the sound of people moaning through the spirits of these old sailors, as though the spirits of these old sailors are reliving their kidnapping over and over and over again for all of eternity. Are we getting a request for the Una?
Somebody's been summoned.
Oh dear. Una's been enjoying the box of clothing that we're going to be donating. We purged a closet. She's like, it's a big soft box.
It is. Softer than my lap, which is why you're going to probably bolt out of here in just a minute.
And the boys, well, they're still not allowed in the office right now, so they're in their room right now.
Not too happy about it, but...
No, they're not. They'll get some more runaround time later. Maybe when they're a little older and we can trust them more, they'll be in here.
Your grandmama says hi.
Alright, so now we're going to go over to Factor's Walk. And for those of you who have never been down to Savannah, Factor's Walk is right down by the riverside. It's where a lot of staircases go down that are in no way, shape, or form to code today. There are signs everywhere warning you about walking up and down these steps. And with good reason. I've tripped on them I don't know how many times.
They're fun steps.
They are very fun steps.
But dangerous and
Not
deadly.
good for short people.
They're historic.
They are very historic.
Bye.
She's had enough. Now, moving along to the much less known part of Savannah's underground, we have Factor's Walk. Named for the cotton factory, excuse me. Ugh. Pardon.
Really now?
Apparently my coffee did not last this long. It's made for the cotton factors of the 19th century, which made the antebellum Savannah rich and famous. Factor's Walk remains one of the least discussed locations in the city. Those who were enslaved were brought into Savannah by being led into the buildings of the River Street. Behind those buildings lay Factor's Walk. Now, the home to many of the sealed-off tumbles that would have descended under Bay Street and into the basements of the buildings that loom overhead. Buildings like Moon River Brewing Company, which is now regarded as one of the most paranormally active locations in the city, would have had one of these tunnels. For the brave souls who still wander down along the walk, heavy wooden doors that once opened into the dark tunnels beneath the street harken back to the 1700s. Dark shadows have been seen darting in and out of them, sometimes even follow the living to wherever they might go next. Factor's Walk is a symbol of Savannah's dark past, and its ghosts are all too eager to remind those who visit that the beauty of Savannah was built on the backs of those whose liberty was lost. Now, moving a little further away, closer to one of the places that we love to stay, is the Old Chandler Hospital and Forsyth Park. Chris and I usually stay about a block and a half from Forsyth Park when we go down to Savannah. And now, not all, of course, the tunnels are out at the riverfront. Just to the east of Forsyth Park lies the Old Chandler Hospital, now part of Savannah's law school. It has a grim history all unto its own. It was in 1876 when one of the largest and final yellow fever epidemics devastated the city of Savannah. Thousands lay dead or dying, and there was no cure for yellow fever. Unless, of course, you have a miracle. If you did manage to survive the often fatal disease, you were strangely immune for life. During this last yellow fever outbreak, the story is told that there were a great number of people who died in Chandler Hospital from yellow fever. So many, in fact, that the tunnels were actually dug and secret burials were made throughout the surrounding area. One of the secret burial grounds was a tunnel that ran underneath Forsyth Park. Records about this are incomplete and inconclusive, but it does give you something to think about next time you're strolling down the beautiful and awe-inspiring paths. Yeah, I mean, you're basically walking on dead anywhere you are in Savannah because of the massive pits they dug for the dead.
One of my favorite stories that they told us when we were on a tour down there is that the old Colonial Cemetery?
Yes.
So the Colonial Cemetery used to be just a little bit bigger than it currently is today, and some of the land was taken up for basically expanding the street.
Yeah.
And under the street, they have utility tunnels, like the sewers, and they run all the cables and stuff underneath the street down there. And if you go down, these old tunnels are brick-lined tunnels, but periodically in the brickwork, there is a larger box, which is essentially the end of a coffin.
And occasionally the end of the coffin might break open a little bit. Maybe a hand falls out.
Yeah.
They have somebody who's on staff to deal with that anytime they come across the bones.
Yeah, it's they have to have an archaeologist on staff, I think. Because
bones. Enjoying your whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so now we're going to pop across the pond, the big pond, and go over to England because I found some more fun stories.
Been bouncing back and forth a little bit on this one.
Yeah, we didn't put this in any order. It's just how I found it.
Yep. So, this time we are going to the Drakelow tunnels.
I just like the name.
Excuse me, Drakelow tunnels, which is, gotta love the name alone. Now,
get a nice dragon in there.
Now, the Drakelow tunnels are a vast sprawl of tunnels lying beneath Kingsford Country Park in Staffordshire, England. The tunnels spread out in a grid pattern under the earth for about 3.5 miles and cover about 250,000 square feet. They reach sizes of 16 feet across by 18 feet high, and this subterranean complex was originally designed as an underground secret factory for the Rover Car Company during World War II in order to build parts for the Bristol Airplane Company. Construction took place from 1941 to 1942, with the tunnels being blasted directly into solid sandstone, after which crews of workers would go about the perilous process of going in to clean out the rubble and shape the tunnels into smooth passageways and rooms. The end result was a vast system of underground tunnels and caverns that could support a small city of industry. When Rover moved in and launched operations in May of 1943, between 500 and 700 employees were assigned to work in the depths of the tunnels.
I don't think I could do that.
Rover used the Drakelow tunnels for manufacturing up until 1946, when reduced hostilities caused production to be halted. Yet this was not the end of the complex's operations or usefulness. From 1950 to 1958, the tunnels were used for the production of various parts for Meteor tank engines, as well as for the storage of tools and engines. The Drakelow tunnels were eventually acquired by the Ministry of Supply and later by the Ministry of Storage. I didn't know there was a Ministry of Storage.
It's like the rumor requirement.
They're next to the Ministry of Magic.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So, anyways, with the rising of the Cold War in the late 50s and 60s, much of the world was living in fear of nuclear apocalypse. This was a time when governments around the world were scrambling to protect themselves, and England was no different. The government went about setting up top-secret fortified bunkers around the country from where it could remain in operation in the event of nuclear strikes. The Drakelow tunnels were perfectly suited to this role, and so they were reconfigured and converted into a nuclear bunker, which was completed in 1961 and called the Regional Seat of Government for Civil Defense Group 9. The underground bunker was designed to sustain up to 350 members from all of the departments of the government, as well as liaisons from the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The complex situated within the Drakelow tunnels was meant to be part of a wider network of 12 such other facilities scattered around the country, a nerve center from which the government could retain control even in the face of nuclear catastrophe. The bunker would see further upgrades and refurbishments in the 1980s with new cutting-edge technology and was rechristened Regional Government Headquarters 9.2. It would remain a highly classified operation right up until the end of the Cold War in 1990. Now, with the end of the Cold War, many facilities that had been constructed for the purpose of preserving society in the face of nuclear annihilation were decommissioned or dismantled. The Drakelow tunnels and their top-secret nuclear command center were decommissioned and sold to the public in 1993. Upon the handing over of the tunnels to the private sector, there were various plans proposed to demolish the tunnels and turn the area into a residential and commercial center. But these were met with opposition from a group called the Drakelow Preservation Trust, who argued that the site held historical importance and furiously resisted development projects there. The Drakelow Preservation Trust has continued to fight plans to redevelop the tunnels in any way in order to preserve the historical significance that they hold right up until this day. The site has been restored and turned into a museum open year-round to the public for tours, and is in fact the largest underground space open to visitors in the entirety of the UK. When walking through the dark, dank, claustrophobic passageways of the complex, where sounds bounce around in odd ways and the dark seems to congeal and twist into strange shapes, it is easy to get the impression that this is a haunted place, and this may indeed be the case. We're just having an evening.
Dinner's talking.
During the original construction of the tunnels, it is said that at least 7 people lost their lives in the dangerous undertaking in a variety of tragic accidents. In October of 1941, a roof collapsed during blasting of the tunnels, which crushed 3 workers under tons of rock. In another accident, 2 exhausted construction workers were riding one of the conveyor belts used to carry rubble and loose rock from the blasting of the tunnels to the outside world when they became caught up in machinery and were mangled to death. Above ground doesn't seem like it was a much safer place, as one woman by the name of Mary Ann Brettle was struck and killed by one of the site's many dump trucks, and a security officer at the site was also killed in an auto accident as he was leaving for the day on his motorcycle. Additionally, after their decommissioning and before their subsequent passing into private hands, the tunnels were rumored to be used for, wait for it, anybody want to guess? Satanic cults, which were said to hold rituals, conduct human sacrifices, and even open up doorways to other realms or dimensions. Ah, the Satanists. We couldn't go an episode without having to mention the Satanists.
Sorry, they like dark and dank.
Yeah, I guess they do. Anyways, we digress. Now, the tragic deaths and the spooky stories have served to imbue the depths of these tunnels with a certain sense of dread and could explain some of the many paranormal phenomena reported from here. Since the tunnels became open to the public, there have been numerous accounts of a wide range of strange goings-on in the Drakelow tunnels. These include an acute feeling of being watched, being pushed or tapped by unseen hands, and even having hair pulled. There's also sudden drops in temperature, inexplicable mists, anomalous sounds such as heavy footsteps, disembodied voices, or music which comes over the wartime speaker system even though it has been out of operation for decades. There are also many reports of seeing shadow people, apparitions, and even strange beasts prowling through the dim confines of the tunnel. The tunnels are also supposedly home to a regular ghost that goes by the name of Oswald, which has been reported throughout the tunnel complex. The spirit reportedly displays a variety of behaviors ranging from playful poltergeist activity to more sinister actions such as pushing, shoving, striking, and pulling hair. This particular entity is believed to be a ghost of one of the workers who died here during construction. Some rather odd sightings have occurred above ground in the area of the tunnels as well. One sighting from 1989 described a family coming across 3 hooded figures which seemed to be hovering around 3 feet above the ground.
Why are the hooded ones always hovering?
I don't know. Maybe I have to ask the people that wrote Dune. That floating guy in Dune. That seemed a little out of place. I again digress. Psychics who have come to investigate the phenomena here have reported that there is a presence not only of the spirits of the dead, but also of powerful demonic entities deep in the subterranean darkness. Much of the ghostly activity within the Drakelow tunnel seems to gravitate around tunnels 1 and 4, and it is from here that one of the most well-known accounts comes from. One evening in 1993, a caretaker was inspecting an old, decrepit kitchen in the vast underground complex when he allegedly heard distinct 1940s-style music wafting through the air from the direction of Tunnel 1. The caretaker thought that perhaps another worker had left a radio on somewhere, so he went to investigate. As he approached the tunnel, the music became progressively louder until it suddenly and inexplicably stopped as he entered Tunnel 1. A complete search of the area turned up no radio, and the caretaker came to the conclusion that the only possible source for the music would have been the World War II era speaker system, but this had not been functional since the 1950s. In another odd case, a caretaker was doing his rounds and locking the complex down for the night while accompanied by his 2 German Shepherd dogs in 1996. In the vicinity of Tunnel 4, the 2 dogs became extremely agitated, barking furiously as if there was an intruder somewhere in the dark. The caretaker investigated the place the dogs seemed to be fixated upon, but there was nobody there. The animals continued to bark for some time at what appeared to be just the wall. The dogs eventually calmed down, but as they entered Tunnel 4 proper, the dogs began growling and snarling viciously at something further down the tunnel. But the caretaker could not at first ascertain that anything was there to make them suddenly become so aggressive. The man pulled at his dog's leashes and tried to move them along, but they refused to budge or stop their incessant barking and growling. The caretaker then reportedly took one more look down the tunnel and saw an ominous mist floating along the dark passageway. Thinking it to be indicative of fire, the caretaker was then astonished when the dogs tore free from his grasp and ran to a blast door to scratch and bite at it in a terrified panic. When the blast door was open, the dogs bolted to the caretaker's car and whined to be let in. The caretaker locked the two dogs into the car and went back to see if there was indeed a fire, but he found no sign of any such thing, and indeed nothing out of the ordinary at all that could explain the dog's bizarre behavior. Tunnel 4 has become known for instilling an inexplicable sense of deep unease, disorientation, dread, and bouts of panic, with many shaken visitors complaining of feeling particularly uneasy in this area of the complex. It is unknown if the Ministry of Defense ever encountered such unexplained occurrences during their years of operation there, and if they did, it seems like these accounts are just as classified as pretty much everything else that went on in there. In recent years, the strangeness surrounding the Drakelow tunnels have made the location a haven for psychics, paranormal researchers, and thrill seekers. There are even regular ghost tours offered to anyone willing to brave the constricting dark tunnels and the possibility of being accosted by creatures from beyond the land of the living.
Road trip.
Road trip. When do we go on that tour? Oh.
Patrick was commenting on our Dune reference.
Ah.
And yes, Una is being very sneaky. She's darting in and out of things because we have more things around that she can play with right now.
Yep. Did the Satanists open up a portal to hell down there? Who knows?
They could have dug something up.
It's your first book, not exactly sure how to make a film out of the book. It doesn't seem like it would translate. The movie was pretty good.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, obviously a cliffhanger because there's more than one.
And I think they're already planning on making the sequel.
Yeah,
so.
2023.
Yeah, so it'll be on its way.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to that.
All right.
But moving along.
Yeah, we're going to come back to another place that we need to get to, which is Portland, Oregon, and going to the catacombs there.
Mm-hmm.
Because catacombs.
Hidden tunnels and catacombs of Portland, Oregon.
Alright, so Oregon's Shanghai tunnels, much like Savannah before, Portland wanted tunnels underground to deliver supplies from their ships in their harbors. Human nature being what it is, they decided some other not-so-nice uses were found for these underground tunnels and spaces. There were opium dens, prostitution, illegal booze storage sites during Prohibition, and other dark activities that made their home in these places in hope of making fast money. Amongst the most harrowing activities to take place in Portland's tunnels, the Shanghaiing and the sex slave trade led to the deaths of many under the streets, and by some accounts continued all the way until 1941. Human trafficking business dried up during World War II, and it never returned as ships started using unionized merchant marines, and the high demand for prostitutes disappeared. However, from 1850 to 1941, it was a different story. The gold rush was in full swing, taking all the cheap labor away from the shipping business. Ship captains certainly didn't want to offer more pay for sailors because of the lack of cheap prospects. The idea of having free labor became very tempting. These captains hired vicious thugs called crimps to spot men who were new to town, become friendly with them, buy them a drink, drug their drink before giving it to them, and then, with help from the bartender, they would drag and drop the unfortunate men down into the tunnels. There was, of course, a trap door that would open by the push of a button. A bounty of $50 was paid for each new recruit.
That's a good chunk of change back then.
That is. Crimps would cram them into small wooden cages with no food or drink, mostly in the tunnels closest to the water. After several days of captivity, they would be given something to drink that was full of drugs, making it easy to move on to the ships that they had then been sold to the various captains. If kidnapped and drugged men actually woke up, they would find themselves chained in a ship, far away from shore, and with the option to work or get thrown overboard. Crimps would also befriend new young women to town, drug them, drop them down the trapdoor, and imprison them into the tunnels as well. After being kidnapped, they would be kept in isolation in a closet-like box. Within 8 to 48 hours, they would be broken in spirit and convinced they would never see their families again. In the perfect state of mind to be sold into sex slavery for the rest of their lives. The lives that were often shortened by disease and violence. In the early days, demands for prostitutes was high, both in private bars like the White Eagle Saloon and some hotels like the upscale Merchant Hotel that were conveniently located within access to the tunnels. In the 20s and the 30s, Prohibition changed the vice trade. The speakeasy crowd moved underground into the basements of bars and tunnels themselves, perhaps becoming the next easy targets of the Crimps and the other gangsters. These underground bars offered a black market liquor, gambling, and sensual comfort as well. Police raids made it harder for the vice businesses, but barrels of booze continued to work their way through the tunnels and the underground speakeasies throughout town. During this time, while some brothels were still located in the tunnels near the underground bars, the most unfortunate women were kidnapped and sold and transported to ships that were destined for other port cities or towns, and even overseas. By 1941, the human trafficking of men and women became unprofitable, and these practices stopped entirely. The tunnels were finally padlocked to keep vice industries out of the area, and they stayed off limits for many years until the Cascade Historical Society discovered them, rented a small part of the tunnel, and they now give tours. Just because the trading may have ended doesn't mean that all is now peaceful in these tunnels. People who have experienced the captivity, the suffering, and death sometimes can't let go of their ordeal and restlessly haunt the place of their captivity. Any quick questions?
We're good.
Okay. Now, the first story we have is that of Nina. Life as a prostitute slave was full of risks. It was life-threatening moments. Being brave enough to be a whistleblower and telling outsiders surely was a death sentence. In the early 1900s, one young sex slave, Nina, was approached by missionaries who promised to rescue her from her horrible life if she told them who kidnapped her and who was her owner. She complied, but was killed and thrown down the elevator shaft of the Merchant Hotel where she worked before she could be rescued. Today, Nina still haunts the restaurant that stands on the site where the since-demolished Merchant Hotel lobby once stood. She has made the current building that houses the Old Town Pizza her home for over 100 years. Her picture's hanging on the wall, and there's a brick that's located in one of the walls of the old elevator shaft, now part of a booth with her name etched in it. She's regarded by many as a brave heroine who dared to turn in her captors and let outsiders know about what was happening. She makes her presence known by appearing as a lady in white or a lady wearing a black dress. She likes to stand on the balcony and makes appearances in the front of the staff and patrons. For her personal amusement, she will allow her aroma of perfume to be noticed by the living, and then a brief glimpse of a black dress on a figure looking over a patron's shoulder. In the early morning or closing time, when she is most active, floating and moving throughout the restaurant, moving chairs, items on tables, and the kitchen to let employees know that she's there. When it's still, the observant person can hear her delicate footsteps tap across the floor. One employee was alone in the kitchen after closing, finishing up work chores. He heard a soft tapping of footsteps coming towards him. He looked up to see a female form dressed in a long black dress walking towards him. When Nina saw him looking at her, she stopped, regarded him for a moment, before going down the basement steps towards the now blocked-off tunnel, where she disappeared.
Boo.
Water.
Water?
Something to wet my throat. Thank you. Now there's the entities of the Shanghai crew of the Jennifer Joe. This is another tale from 1902. The drugged, brutally treated Shanghai crew of the four-masted schooner Jennifer Joe died together in the bowels of the ship as it sank with them chained together in Portland Harbor. Starting at the tunnels nearest the water every year on the anniversary of their drowning at sea, they rush back as a group looking for those responsible, hoping to get justice of some sort. Various witnesses have seen them, heard them, and actually been touched by a cold, wet hand. Now the Crimps are also in the tunnels. During Prohibition, as we mentioned, many mobsters and would market the black market booze. They sometimes would go into battles with rival gangsters over territorial markets and public places, causing the deaths of not only their rivals, but anybody else who happened to get in the way at the wrong place at the wrong time. One of the most brutal incidents was when the gangsters that ran the speakeasy out of one of the basements located on Burnside Street met an untimely end. Terror reigned when when a rival gang showed up wearing stolen Portland police uniforms, armed with Tommy guns and axes. People at the speakeasy and the gangsters who ran it escaped down the tunnel with the killers close behind them. All was lost when the frightened people came to the narrowing of the tunnel. And this is where they were massacred without mercy. Some of these deceased miscreants still loom in the darkness as their hulking, shadowy figures with burning red eyes can be seen, their forms of eternal damnation incarnate. For those who are fortunate enough not to see these terrifying figures, they still might see them or sense them. People get an uneasy feeling as a thick atmosphere permeates some of the tunnels. Feeling of being watched is almost overwhelming.
Now, I wonder, that is like almost exactly like the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Yeah.
The, Al Capone's gang in there in Chicago. But that's the one you hear about. You don't hear about this one.
Underground.
Which, basically, same MO.
Mm-hmm.
Dressed up as cops, they come in and Tommy guns start blazing. Which came first, though? I have to look that up.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly, because I didn't even think about that. I didn't put 2 plus 2 together until we're sitting here. So I might have to look it up and see who came up with the ingenious yet bloody idea first.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to read about Paris?
No.
No. I get to read about Paris?
Yep.
Oh.
Because I need...
You got a tickle in your
I
throat?
got a tickle. I need to clear my throat.
Now we promised Paris. Patty. So, hopping the pond again. This was not intentional. We're just crisscrossing the Atlantic, racking up the frequent flyer miles.
I so wanted to go to the Catacombs when I was in Paris, and my school teacher said no.
That's lame. We'll get there. One day. So, now the story behind the Paris catacombs is truly macabre. This is something. So, now long ago, as the city of Paris grew, it became necessary to provide more space for the living. Now, to do so, engineers and planners decided to move the mass of humanity least likely to protest. The dead. Starting in 1786, millions of Parisian dead from the city's densely packed cemeteries, some dating back 1,200 years, were quietly disinterred in one of the largest engineering feats in history, and their remains were deposited along the walls of the chilly, dank passageways lying beneath the City of Light. The catacombs were first cleared in Roman times, with succeeding generations of Gauls and Frenchmen perfecting the Roman engineering. Now, the catacombs are a spidery network that spans more than 200 miles beneath the city streets. One should only explore these passages with experience and great caution. There have been many reports of rash individuals who wandered into the catacombs for a laugh and who have never been seen again.
You don't wander into underground caves just for the fun of it.
Now, the Paris catacombs are, of course, infamous, and much has been written about their history and purpose. 1 million visitors a year are said to visit the dank corridors and to stare at the bones of the long dead. In early days, visitors entered the catacombs through the official entrance known as the Barrière d'Enfer, or the Gate of Hell. Though now there is a designated entrance for tourists and only part of the catacombs are open to explorers. Over the years, many visitors have encountered more than just silence in the catacombs. They have encountered the ghostly inhabitants that roam the passageways and quietly lurk after the tour groups. To some, the experience is completely overwhelming, and tours have been cut short by the growing sense of unease. Photos have revealed ghostly apparitions, and EVPs have been recorded throughout the vaults. According to legends, those who have dared venture into the catacombs after midnight reportedly hear the walls talking to them. Disembodied voices try to lure adventurers further into the tunnels, encouraging them to lose their way and suffer a slow and agonizing end. There are rumors of people wandering off into the maze-like tunnels and going mad. In 2010, cave explorers recovered video footage from the 1990s that they claimed showed a man wandering lost through the dark corridors until he finally panics, drops the camera, and bolts off into the dark, never to be seen again. Though others doubt the authenticity of the recording. Either way, it's a rather chilling kind of piece of, yeah. Think Blair Witch Project with the distinct possibility that it actually was kind of real. Something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Now, the footage is said to have inspired the 2014 Catacomb horror movie As Above, So Below, which, I will say, I have seen it, and it's not a bad flick if you have the stomach for horror films. Just saying.
I haven't seen it.
No, because, well, I usually watch horror movies after you go to bed.
Yep. Not my thing.
Typically not your thing. Now, with this in mind, it's probably best to stick with an official tour group. Not probably, just please do that.
Yeah.
Do not,
Don't add to the ghostly activity.
Yep, they got plenty to talk about there. Now, one of the better-known spirits of the Paris catacombs dates back to the French Revolution, because, well, the French Revolution, of course. A man named Philibert Epsert. Yeah, Epser. We'll go with Epser. Was a doorman at the Val de Grâce Hospital. On a mission to fetch a certain liqueur from a cellar, Philibert actually ended up entering the Paris catacombs instead. Oops. Walking around the pitch-black catacombs alone with just a single candle, Philibert became lost and confused. Philibert's candle eventually went out, leaving him alone in the inky darkness. At this point, it was virtually impossible for him to escape the catacombs. I have a bad typo in there. I have no idea what I was supposed to say. His body was not found until 11 years later when a group of cataphiles, as they are called, uncovered it.
Those are the ones who like to go exploring caves, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a cataphile.
These cataphiles identified Philibert by the hospital keyring hanging from his belt. Philibert is buried in the catacombs in the exact same space where he died, with the tombstone describing his death. Cataphiles and catacomb folklore tellers say that each November 3rd, Philibert's ghost haunts the labyrinth of the catacombs. A less paranormal but incredibly bizarre event took place in the catacombs in 2004. A group of police officers was exploring a part of the Paris catacombs restricted from public access, and they began to uncover very strange things. First, they found a PA system with pre-recorded guard dog barking noises playing. Then, they found 3,000 square feet of galleries, wired for phones using pirated electricity. Moving on, the officers found a bar, living area, workshop, lounge, and even a cinema with room to seat 20 people. The cinema seats had been carved into the stones of the catacombs. The creepiest part was they saw cameras on the ceilings recording them. The police squad went back to the area a few days later with a larger team to further investigate, but everything they had discovered, from the phone lines to the Paris catacomb cinema, had vanished. The only thing they found, a note that read, "Ne cherche pas," meaning do not search.
That's creepy.
Yeah. Pretty awesome, though.
Yeah.
That
creepy.
Yeah.
Awesome, but creepy. It's like, ne touche pas.
Yeah.
Don't touch me. Don't search for me.
Yeah. So, we're not hopping back across the Atlantic with this next stop.
We're going a little further.
We're going south.
South.
We're going south. We are jumping continents.
Yes. To another place I want to go that my father has been to, and I have artifacts from.
Oh, am I reading? Do you want me to?
You can.
Are you okay?
I'm scratchy.
Ah, okay. We'll save your voice.
Thank you.
So, this, different continent. This time we're moving south to hit Africa, where we will find Wadi Biban el Mulk, which translates to Gates of the King. This is a valley in Egypt where, for a period of nearly 500 years, from the 16th to 11th century BC, long time ago, tombs were constructed for the kings and powerful nobles of the 18th through 20th dynasties of ancient Egypt. The valley stands on the west bank of the Nile across from modern Luxor, which was ancient Thebes, within the heart of the Theban necropolis. The wadi consists of two valleys, the East Valley, where the majority of the royal tombs are situated, and the West Valley, very originally named, but appropriate, it works. The official name for the site in ancient times was the Great and Majestic Necropolis of the Millions of Years of the Pharaoh, Life, Strength, Health in the west of Thebes, or more usually, Tasikma, the Great Field.
So much easier to say that.
Tasikma, I think I got the pronunciation fairly right on that. I think I did. Hard to say.
AKA the Valley of the Kings.
If anybody is fluent in Egypt and would like to hit us up after we're done talking here this evening, I'm willing to listen. The Valley of the Kings has been a major area of modern Egyptological exploration for the last 2 centuries. Before this area was a site for tourism in antiquity, especially during Roman times, this area illustrates the exchanges in the study of ancient Egypt, starting as antiquity hunting and ending as scientific excavation of the whole Theban necropolis. Despite the exploration and investigation noted below, only 11 of the tombs have actually been completely recorded. The area has been a focus of concentrated archaeological and Egyptological exploration since the end of the 18th century, and its tombs and burials continue to stimulate research and interest. In modern times, the valley has become famous for the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, with its rumors, of course, of the curse of the pharaohs, and is one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world. In 1979, along with the rest of the Theban necropolis, it became a World Heritage Site. Surprised it took that long. Stories of the Mummy's Curse, or King Tut's Curse, excited the world after the discovery in 1922 of the ancient pharaoh's tomb. Lord Carnarvon, a British sponsor of archaeology in Egypt, died shortly after attending the tomb's opening, inspiring speculation that supernatural forces were at work.
So for those of you that might be familiar with the name, his house is the one that's in Downton Abbey. It is Downton. That's the same family.
Fun fact.
Fun fact.
Fun fact.
They have some of his findings in the house, by the way.
Isn't it rumored that his dog, even though he was back in England,
Also died, yeah.
like at the same time
Yep.
Lord Carnarvon
Yep.
keeled over in Egypt?
Yep.
Howled and just abruptly keeled over.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, the Valley of the Kings is believed to be haunted by multiple pharaohs, including King Tut himself. It's said that when excavators opened a new tomb, they released the spirit of whoever was in it. Paranormal sightings that have been reported by watch guards include the ghost of Akhenaten and a pharaoh on a chariot being pulled by black horses. Cursed or not, it's always best to use caution and respect when exploring the final resting places of the ancient dead.
Yeah. And there's quite a few shows recently about, like, going in and following the archaeologists as they're trying to find these tombs. And it's such a limited amount of time they have to actually do this, where it's safe to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fascinating to watch.
Very.
I definitely want to get down there at some point. Do a Nile cruise and
One day.
one day.
One day.
Alright.
You wanted to read
I
this.
want Edinburgh.
That's fine. That is fine.
Anything that we need to address?
Cataphile. Not what I was thinking. I was thinking of people obsessed with kitties.
Nope.
Nope, but that is makes sense. I can understand that. Oh gosh. Whoop. Come on, cooperate. Nope, not go cooperate. Yeah, so terrifying massacres either way, referring back to before. I would have found that lame too.
Referring to not going into the catacombs.
Yes. They featured the catacombs on an episode of The Scariest Places on Earth. Yeah, that definitely justified. Documenting a man that went in to solve a mystery. By the end of the episode, the guy was so disturbed by both the horrors of the catacombs and how easy it was to get lost that he basically swore never to go back there again.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, that makes sense. I would much rather add to the paranormal activity there as one of the living, Or I guess that would be normal activity, but then again, nothing about me is normal. Oh, Patrick.
You're in good company.
Yes, and yeah, Glenn, if you can, England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland.
All of them are fantastic. I've been to
Delightful.
all of them. He's
Delightful.
been to 3 of them.
Yep.
Well,
No,
two.
two. I haven't been to England. And dogs really are man's best friend. One of these days I'm going to die trying to pet a hellhound or Cerberus. Una, you want a hellhound brother or sister?
Isn't that what we call the boys? She's right there. She's behind the table.
Okay. Ah, Lulu came out.
Yep.
You can barely see Lulu's butt on the edge of the screen.
All right, let's talk Edinburgh. So, of course, Chris and I have had a chance to visit here ourselves. Scotland's capital city of Edinburgh is rich with its haunting history, suffering through the Roman occupation, the Viking raids until 35.
Bless you.
Thank you.
What was that? Something 35?
1035.
1035.
1035.
1035 80.
When Duncan I became the first king of Scotland. Beneath the modern city streets, of course, you are going to find the truly creepy sight, the Edinburgh Vaults. Hidden underneath the South Bridge, they represent a labyrinth of spooky chambers that have seen a variety of uses, both innocent and, well, not so innocent in their inception. The bridge dates back to 1788, when the desire of the townspeople to live close to the highly defensible Edinburgh Castle led to the construction of bridges to span the vast ravines to the north and the south of the castle. South Bridge spanned just over 1,000 feet, standing 31 feet above ground at its highest point, penetrating the bedrock as deep as 22 feet. This construction resulted in a series of chambered vaults that were initially used as storehouses. By the 19th century, businesses in Edinburgh were booming. Cobblers, butchers, and wine merchants set up their businesses on the surface of South Bridge, hoping to capitalize on the increased traffic across the bridge. One level below, the street housed workshops, and below these were living quarters. In total, about 120 rooms were created in the arches of the bridge and the levels mirroring the socio-economic status of those who dwelt there. The lower you live, the lower your station in life. However, a flaw of Edinburgh's South Bridge soon threatened the lives and livelihoods. Rain drove through the cracks in the poorly constructed viaduct and carried the city's blood, water, waste, and disease to the lowest levels, where the poor battled to survive. During the Irish potato famine of 1845 to 1847, thousands of Irish immigrated to Scotland, seeking only survival. Forced into the vaults under the bridge, as many as 10 people were living in a single room. The conditions were poor, and the tenants crowded, damp, and barely with any air circulation. Hello, Una. Come here. Stop showing everybody your fur. Rude. And just like that, the area quickly became Edinburgh's red light district. Prostitution, gambling, and thriving black market were a commonplace in the vaults. Murder, rape, and death were rampant as disease and crime took hold of the area. Some of the most malevolent characters to lurk in the recesses of the vaults rose in response to what would have been otherwise seemed like a positive step. The Judgment of Death Act in 1823 saw a number of crimes punishable by death in Britain drop dramatically. Good news in theory, but since medicine and anatomical schools were only legally allowed to dissect the cadavers of those who had been condemned to death, this led to an extreme shortage of dead bodies available for research. However, the financial compensation... She's trying again. Excuse me. Offered by medical schools meant that some unscrupulous types soon found a way around this shortage of bodies, leading a rash of grave robbing by those known as resurrectionists. Many of these body snatchers found that in hidden from view, the vaults provided the perfect place for crime to occur and bodies to be kept. The vaults were located close proximity to the graveyard as well as the medical school, making them exceedingly convenient for this grim activity. Soon, however, instances of grave robbing became so commonplace that relatives would watch over the recently dug graves of their dearly departed, and watchtowers were installed in cemeteries across the land. The fresher the body, the more money it was worth, and thus it didn't take long for grave robbing to graduate to anatomy murder. Murder committed with the sole intention of providing the remains to medical research.
Yuna's doing stuff. Because Yuna.
Eventually, living conditions proved to be so unsuitable for these criminals who could no longer tolerate the poorly circulated air, lack of sunlight, running water, and sanitation. Things became so bad by the 1860s that most of the vaults had been emptied and filled with rubble. As to prevent flooding and discourage ongoing crime. For over 100 years, they laid abandoned and forgotten. Obscurity ended in 1988 when a man named Norrie Rowan owned a bar on the South Bridge, discovered a section of medieval street below his property, and soon an entire underground labyrinth. Since then, the cavernous vaults of South Bridge have been opened to the public, and the reports of the paranormal activity have poured in. Witnesses claim to feel cold gusts of air in the stagnant chambers, disembodied voices echo through the dark passages, and some see and sense intangible presences. Some ghosts are bolder, like the spectral child Jack, who grabs visitors' hands in the wine vault. Another more menacing presence is known as Mr. Boots. He's an unkept man, so his name for his tall boots. Mr. Boots is an evil entity who is believed to have murdered a woman and kept the body in his house inside the vaults. Today, his spirit lurks in the back section of the vault and has been known to push or throw rocks at visitors, particularly those who dare to sit on a spot where he was rumored to have stashed his body, the body of his victim. Some have claimed to hear his thick, heavy steps on the cobbles and his echoing voice cursing through the chambers. Other spirits in the vaults are not known to be nearly as terrifying. There's the aristocrat and the cobbler. The aristocrat is a well-to-do gentleman with tall black hat and beard who is often seen leaning against the wall between the double-heighted room in the tavern. Arms folded, he watches and grins as people pass by. Though not outwardly a mean spirit, his presence is reportedly quite sinister. As for the cobbler, he resides in an aptly named cobbler's room. Believed to be a shoemaker from the late 18th century, he's described as short, stocky, wearing a long leather apron and a white shirt. He's known to smile at people as they pass, and is generally felt as one of the more positive presences within the vaults.
Yuna has successfully stolen the show.
Of course! Because Yuna has to steal the show. It's been a very long time since she has done so. And since we don't have Zoe here anymore to steal the show, and she's doing fantastic with her new mummy.
Which is, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
The household haunts of Richmond corporate headquarters has been
much more peaceful.
Much more peaceful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was it, wasn't it?
That was.
Wow, okay. Oh, yeah, geez, and we've been on for over an hour already.
Yep. Not too far over.
No, not too far over. But time gets away when you're talking about fun stuff.
Yes.
Well.
And we'll be back in our normal schedule, so 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing Haunted Florida, because Chris and I are getting ready to go out do some legwork for our Haunted Key West trip.
Yep.
It's in December 2022, so again, if you have not booked for that, please do so. Space is limited.
Yes. Yep, and we will do, we're not going to do any, big live streams like this while we're down there, but you can
we'll probably do some videos and post later.
Yep, you can count on us popping in every once in a while with a little video or something like that of some of the treats and temptations that await down in Key West. But we're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But before we get there, we will have Haunted Florida for you, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. We are going back to 2 weeks now that the October's over. I have no idea what that's ultimately going to do to our schedule around the holidays.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Of course, we'll do a haunted Christmas and bring you some good old Victorian tales.
Yep.
But
And if you want to come listen to some in person, we're actively working on setting up a Victorian ghost story telling session down at Richbrow Brewing.
Yep.
So don't know exactly what time that's going to be yet, but it'll be right
around Christmas Eve.
Right, yeah, not on Christmas Eve, but getting close. So it'll be
That week.
That'll be that week, and we'll be down there. And there's no cover charge for it, but we definitely encourage you to get yourself a little drink while you're there, and
or a pizza. Their pizza's amazing.
Oh, yeah, they do have very good pizzas, and they just expanded their pizza selection. So, but yeah, get yourself a bevy, get yourself a pizza, come on down and listen to a couple of Victorian ghost stories. We're selecting a couple, and we'll probably be talking for about an hour.
Yep.
So looking forward to that. That's it was fun when we did that the last time, which was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In the before days when we did an abridged telling of a Christmas Carol. So that was a lot of fun.
Yep.
And so we're looking forward to doing this again, and this time, a couple of some of the more, well, at least definitely the ones a little bit more on the grim side. But it is a classic Victorian ghost story, so looking forward to that. And we'll bring you a couple on the air as well, because we have a whole collection of them to share, so lots of stuff to talk about.
Yep. And with that, we will catch you all later. Have a fun 2 weeks, and we'll be back.
Yep. We'll
Soon.
be back in in a couple
sunny
weeks.
Florida stories.
Yep. And as always, you do not have to wait for these to chat with us. If you ever want to drop us a note and chat about something, we are always happy to hear from you. So go ahead, reach out, say hello, we'll chat, and
We will see you in 2 weeks. Have a good night. Bye.
Night, everybody.